Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
At the Boise Art Museum right now, there are almost 1,000 hand-painted plates on display. The blue and white dishes show detailed illustrations of comfort foods like spaghetti and pancakes and hamburgers, the last meals of death row inmates.
You have to wonder what kind of life they lived for that to be the case.
I'm Julie Luqueta. Find my report and pictures of the Last Supper exhibit at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. You're listening to Idaho Matters. It's Friday, which means it's time for our Reporter Roundtable. We will get you up to date on the news that made headlines this last week. And today our panelists include Laura Guido with the Idaho Capital Sun, Sarah Cutler, reporter with Idaho Statesman, and Drew Dodson, reporter and editor for the Valley Lookout. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
And let me begin today with some, and I want to start with some breaking news out of the state legislature. And this just happened today. So Sarah, the head of Idaho's Finance Committee, which is known as JFAC, the Joint Finance and Appropriation Committee, is stepping down, not just from that position, but from the legislature. So what's going on?
Yes, this is big news ahead of the upcoming legislative session. So Representative Wendy Horman announced today that she'll be stepping down from the legislature and moving to Washington, D.C. in January to join the Trump administration's Department of Health and Human Services. She'll be working under Alex Adams, who used to head up health and welfare here in Idaho, and she'll be the director of the Office of Child Care in the Administration for Children and Families.
So, Sarah, how significant is Wendy Horman's departure for Idaho's budgeting process? Because we are going into a projected deficit. So I'm curious about what immediate challenges will her replacement face heading into the 2026 session? And I guess, how will her replacement be named?
For sure, this development definitely got our attention given the significant focus on the budget this upcoming session. As you alluded to, Idaho is projected to end the year with about a $40 million deficit and projected to see a deficit in the hundreds of millions in fiscal year 2027. I think it might be a remain to be seen whether Horman's departure majorly changes the Finance Committee's approach. It'll depend, of course, on who replaces her. I talked with her co-chair, Senator Scott Grow, this morning, who declined to speculate on who that replacement might be. Ultimately, that will be a decision for the Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle. And then there will just be questions about whether that replacement, is on the same page that Senator Grow and Representative Horman had been. In terms of immediate challenges facing her successor, I think a key question out of the gate is going to be whether and how Idaho decides to conform its own state tax code with the federal code outlined in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Usually this is sort of a wonky non-issue early in the session, and Idaho typically adopts most or all of the tax breaks in the federal code. But given the budget angst right now, that's going to be more of an open question. I don't think we've seen a precise number, but I've seen folks are estimating that fully adopting that federal tax code in the state code could cost the state over $150 million in lost tax revenue.
So, Sarah, since we don't know yet who will replace her on JFAC, do we know how the process will work for replacing her position in the legislature? And will someone be named? She's stepping down January 5th, right? And the session begins on the 12th.
Yes, and you know what? I have to admit I am blanking. I believe that no, you know what? I don't want to misspeak on how the process typically works. I think it may
Okay.
involve some names being submitted and an appointment by the governor, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I
You're right.
think that's how it works too, but I would agree with that we won't we won't over speculate when we don't remember the exact details. So given that though, Sarah, Horman had a central role in tax policy and in fact a big role in the school tax credit program here in Idaho. So how might her move to a federal child care role influence, if at all, Idaho's ongoing debates over education funding and fiscal priorities?
Yeah, I don't know that I expect her federal role to, trickle down back to Idaho in terms of what is being promoted at that level. I can say that she certainly played a major role last year in the tax cuts that Democrats in particular have blamed for our current budget shortfalls, and she was a co-sponsor of House Bill 93, which offered tax credits for families sending their children to private schools, which has been, referred to also as school vouchers. So a lot of progress you could say was made on that front last year. But I still think that those initiatives have a lot of support within the body, either way. And so I think it may remain to be seen, and or there may be, momentum on some of those initiatives, even without her.
All right. Thanks for that update, Sarah. And I know we'll all be following this since this literally came down this morning about this move. So again, Representative Wendy Horman will be stepping away not just from her role on the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee. She will be leaving the legislature to go to DC to work with Alex Adams. With that, Drew, I want to move into a new partnership that could make Idaho the nation's only source of domestically processed, I think I'm saying this right, antimony for the US military to use. So, what does this partnership realistically mean for national security as well as Idaho's economy? And I guess, who are these partners?
Yeah, first of all, you got the pronunciation just right, antimony.
Okay, good.
And this is a partnership between Perpetua Resources, which has been permitted as of earlier this year to operate a gold and antimony mine in Eastern Valley County, and the Idaho National Laboratory, which is out in Eastern Idaho. It's a federally funded research facility. Um, and basically what this partnership is it calls for a pilot modular processing plant to be built for antimony to see if indeed the antimony from stibnite can be turned into military grade antimony for use in munitions by the Department of War. And so this is a 5 month pilot program. It's expected to get off the ground early next year. And, so sometime through the middle of next year, we should have a bigger idea of, whether this will be, um, kind of this will stick moving forward, and the military will continue being supplied by the stibnite mine, or if it doesn't work out. I can tell you up front that the anticipation at this point by Perpetua is that up to about 10% of the antimony from the mine would be routed to the military. That, my
Mm.
understanding, would meet the military's peacetime needs for antimony.
So, Drew, this project is fairly controversial. So, what environmental concerns and legal challenges still stand in the way? And how are the local communities responding to this?
Well, there's multiple lawsuits still pending. One by the Nez Perce tribe, which they have treaty rights on some of the lands that the mining proposal is subject to, as well as conservation organizations across the state. The Idaho Conservation League being one of them. Save the South Fork Salmon River. That's another. It's a local advocacy conservation group opposed to the stibnite mine. The basis of the lawsuits is generally that the approval issued by the Forest Service and other regulators ran afoul of standards for clean air, clean water, wildlife, that kind of thing. So we still don't know how those are going to shake out. They're still pending. Um, but I mean, I can tell you, as far as the community reaction to this, it really is all over the map. There's
Mm.
lots of people in Valley County that are big supporters of the mine. There's also lots of people who are very opposed. And now, as we get a little bit closer to go time, if you will, Perpetua is planning to begin major construction activities next year, and they've already been doing some preliminary work this year. We're now starting to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of it. I can tell you today I'll be publishing a story about a gate across Warm Lake Road, which
Oh.
yeah, this is, right in the area of Warm Lake Lodge. In fact, just
Mm-hmm.
past the lodge. And the exact mechanics and of the gate and the placement, all of that is still to be determined by Valley County. But that's kind of, the granular detail we're starting to get into now is okay, well, what kind of ramifications is that going to have on recreation, on travel, on all of that? So it's kind of been interesting as we've moved through this process to for a long time, it's big picture ideas. It's the risk of environmental damage. It's, the
Hmm.
economic benefits, those sorts of big picture things. And now we're all the way down to, well, gosh, what's this gate going to do for snowmobile access? What will it mean for businesses in the backcountry? That kind of thing. So we continue to it's new things all the time, it seems like.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, we will, of course, keep talking with you about this in particular as this moves forward into the new year. So, Laura, Idaho agriculture saw some record cash receipts this year, and this was in part due to a really booming cattle industry. But then we had things like rising costs and tariffs, and then uncertain weather. So, this could potentially bring some challenges in 2026. So, which farmers and commodities are most at risk as we head into 2026? And what are the biggest pressures they're facing?
Sure. So, yeah, this week I went to the annual Ag Outlook held by the University of Idaho, and Brett Wilder, who's an extension educator there, basically said it was a tale of two ag economies. Like you said,
Mm,
cattle did really well. They brought in a lot of money, and it really drove the record high cash receipts. It was about $12.1 billion for all of ag. Um, that was huge. But other, common products from Idaho, wheat, potatoes, sugar beets, barley, those were all down from the prior year. And so not everyone is feeling this boom. And like you said, there's a lot of factors. They basically said, ag is looking for stability right now because there's been
mm.
tariffs and they've been up and down and there's been inflation and some things are getting better, some things are getting worse. So yeah, farmers are dealing with a lot, and it really
Yeah.
depends on what type of crop you have.
So, with that, Laura, did at this conference, did they hone in on like one like largest pressure that they're facing, or is it all of these things? The rising costs, the tariffs, I mean, the weather.
Yeah, it was really a combination. The tariffs, that's just been causing some instability. A lot of those have sort of settled down. At least there's agreements with Canada and Mexico, and but the thing is, people just kind of don't know what's going to happen with those as we move forward because that's been
Mm,
changing quickly. Inflation, some of those costs are down. Like some of the like costs with fertilizer are down, but interest rates are still high. There's costs for storage and transportation are high. Um, so it really depends on if you're a farm that has a lot of uh, federal assistance. That's the inflation. The interest rate is going to hit you really hard. If you're a grain operator, then those storage and transportation costs are going to hit you really hard. And like you said, the weather is another major factor. We're just coming off of a pretty hot and dry year,
hmm.
and we're maybe looking at potentially another one, but it's always uncertain at this point.
All right, appreciate that update, Laura. So, Sarah, Idaho, some folks are saying Idaho could become ground zero in a nationwide healthcare crisis if the Affordable Care Act subsidies expire. And we're talking thousands of people at risk of losing coverage. And hospitals here in Idaho have actually also warned of really some serious financial and public health consequences. So I want to start with really what's at stake here. How many Idahoans are realistically expected to lose coverage if these subsidies expire, which I believe would be January? And who is most vulnerable?
Yeah, so I think they're set to expire at the end of this year. And so the state's health insurance marketplace called Your Health Idaho, I believe has anticipated that 25,000 Idahoans may drop their coverage because of the loss of these subsidies and the resulting increase in premium costs. And of course, that lack of health insurance would be maybe most immediately dire for those who have chronic conditions or disabilities. This is a population that makes too much money to be on Medicaid, but they're often self-employed, like maybe farmers, ranchers, small business owners. They may not have a lot of other options for insurance if they can't afford a marketplace plan. One thing I do want to quickly highlight is that Your Health Idaho's initial data that they shared painted sort of a murky picture about what's going on. Uh,
Hmm.
Thousands of Idahoans, I believe over 8,000, canceled their marketplace plans during the recent open enrollment period. About 5,000 of those specifically citing concerns about affordability. But at the same time, the state did see a lot of new people enrolling, so there was actually a 3 or 4% increase in the number of people enrolled overall. But the
Hmm.
marketplace did say that it's early, and they expect these numbers to continue to settle and shift until early next year. Both, I think, as folks might decide early in the year if the subsidies expire that they cannot afford the plans they've signed up for, or if they simply fail to pay their premiums and plans drop them. So we may continue to see
Hmm.
some changes, exacerbation there.
So let's talk about hospitals next, Sarah, because what are healthcare providers saying about how this could impact care access and even, hospital viability across our state?
Yeah, so I think the concern here is that obviously insurance relies broadly on having a really big pool of people to share the risk, and if premiums dramatically increase, as they likely will if subsidies go away, folks who are generally pretty healthy may be more likely to say, you know what, never mind, I'll just try my luck and not have insurance. Obviously, this is a risk for them personally, but it also means that insurance companies would have more people on the books who are very expensive to insure, losing the maybe healthier populations who help to kind of subsidize that risk. And so, as State Representative Ilana Rubel noted this week at a protest, this could be really dire for hospitals and providers, especially in rural areas, which basically rely on people with private insurance to kind of help pay the bills and to subsidize lower reimbursement rates that those hospitals get from Medicaid. And she gave a hypothetical example that in an extreme case, if a hospital was forced to close, couldn't pay the bills and make ends meet, even someone who is very wealthy, might have a great insurance plan, will be out of luck if the nearest hospital to them has closed down because there wasn't enough insurance payments.
So, Sarah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that this has become an incredibly political issue. So, what are Idaho's congressional leaders saying or doing about renewing these subsidies? I mean, is there any sign of movement in Congress? Because it doesn't seem like there is.
I would say limited. So I think that, what I understand is that a lot of Republicans, including in Idaho, feel that the cost of subsidizing these marketplace plans is unsustainable, particularly given the national debt. Yes, the subsidies keep the plans more affordable for those individual users, but the subsidies themselves are a growing burden for taxpayers nationwide as healthcare costs rise. However, I do get the sense that federal lawmakers on the left and the right are feeling a lot of pressure on this. It seems to have stayed at the top of the agenda, even as it has hit some gridlock. My understanding, as mentioned, the subsidies at the moment, I think, are going to expire at the end of the year. But I
Hmm.
believe I've seen that there has been some kind of maneuvering by moderate Republicans at the federal level, which means that there may be a likely January vote on reviving the subsidies, even if they expire at the end of the year. But it has hit a lot of gridlock, and I think it remains to be seen where that resolves.
Hmm. All right, appreciate that, Sarah. Drew, I want to spend the last couple of minutes before we wrap up talking about what happened earlier this week in Donnelly. So let me get this straight. A woman is in the hospital, her husband's in jail. Um, Walk us through what happened.
Yeah, so you got the gist of that right. It was actually it was last week.
Okay.
Gosh, the exact date, but it slips my mind. But yeah, sometime last week. And yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. And for what it's worth, I live very, very, couple hundred feet from the site of this
Oh,
event. It was downtown Donnelly, right by the Donnelly Public Library, if you're
okay.
familiar with where that is. Um, and yeah, it's just that a woman, she was shot in the shoulder, and the reporting party told police that the man believed to have been the shooter had fled the scene, and um, they found a truck matching the description of the truck that the man left in, kind of crashed near the Rainbow Bridge along Idaho 55. It had slid off. It was kind of slick that night. Um, and then this is probably the most unbelievable part of the story. Uh, the man was picked up by a Good Samaritan. He was walking along the highway. A Good Samaritan picks him up, continues him on his way down to the Treasure Valley, and somewhere along the way, the man is on the phone with somebody, and he's describing in Spanish what happened.
Oh,
And the driver overhears all this, understands some amount of it, obviously enough of it, and hears that the man is attempting to get to Mexico. Um,
oh,
I don't know if this Good Samaritan is who reported it to police in the Treasure Valley, but soon thereafter, the man was arrested there at the intersection of Horseshoe Bend Road and State Street. And he's currently being held in the Valley County Jail. His next court
okay.
appearance is December 23rd. But yes, this thing. I mean, I just can't imagine, being the Good Samaritan. And the other interesting thing about all this is, I was home that night, and I'm not a direct neighbor to this property, but I heard nothing. I didn't see police lights. I talked to neighbors living all around. Very few heard anything. It wasn't until they saw police lights coming through their windows that they noticed it. And in fact, the Donnelly Public Library had a board meeting going on at the time, and there was 10 people in there. None of them heard
Wow.
anything.
Oh
So
my
yeah, it's
goodness. It's a
kind of a
crazy
crazy
story,
one for
Drew.
right for small town Donnelly especially.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, hey, I want to thank everybody so much. Thank you for coming on, especially this Friday before Christmas. So thank you to our Reporter Roundtable. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
Looking for another podcast to listen to? Check out The Nature of Idaho from our partner station KISU in Eastern Idaho. Join hosts Peter Pruitt and Dr. Leif Tapanilla as they share fascinating stories from the Gem State's great outdoors, celebrating Idaho's wildlife, landscape, and natural wonders. That's The Nature of Idaho from KISU. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.